What team will pay the most money in deferred salaries to retired players this year?
Welcome everybody to the Baseball Brewhaha. It's your spot for obscure baseball trivia. We're diving in deep today. I'm Aaron. That's my identical twin brother, Adam. Join us for a cup of coffee, and we're going to be putting our baseball knowledge to the test. Adam, you gave us a question already. This was actually from one of our subscribers, from Tim. Said he wanted a question about deferred salaries. He and I must have been reading the similar article about Ken Griffey Jr. being the fourth highest paid player on the Reds roster, even though Ken Griffey Jr. has been retired for a good 10 plus years. So, Adam, let's dive in.
Yeah, this feels obscure, but it's also very relevant because it affects your favorite team's salary cap
Yes.
uh, and ability to be successful this season. So here we go. What team will pay the most in deferred salaries to retired players this year? Our options are the Baltimore Orioles, Boston Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds, or Washington Nationals.
Yeah, I was trying to think about this, and obviously it's hard to know, like, because I don't remember who like played out their contract and who didn't. I just don't pay that close. Um, I mean, the Mariners I pay a little bit closer attention to, but they're not in this conversation. I went with Baltimore, largely on the back of Chris Davis and his enormous salary that they've been eating, and will pay him for quite some time into the future. I believe until he's 51. And so, but I was also thinking, I feel like the Nationals had guys. I mean, the Red Sox tend to sign guys to bigger contracts as well. So those are the type of guys I was thinking about. But ultimately, I landed Baltimore, largely again because of Chris Davis.
Yeah, I had forgotten about Chris Davis. So what I went with was Boston because of the large contracts and big market team trying to keep up with the Yankees and everybody else. Um, so so yeah, Boston Red Sox and uh, as far as like, this is the put it on the charge it to the card, version of paying salaries for players. And
Yeah,
um, also thinking about the Red Sox, they not only pay high salaries, but they're trading guys, they're making deals, they're trying to win now, and I know teams can get pretty creative with their salary options and their contracts. So I
yeah.
went Boston Red Sox here. So let's see what we got. The correct answer is the Baltimore Orioles. You are correct. Well done. And not only that,
Mhm.
so the Baltimore Orioles will pay $15.8 million to retired players this year.
Well, yeah.
Um, Chris Davis will make 14.8 million of that by himself.
Oh, that's great. So, well, and this is crazy too because like the Orioles payroll is still like bottom of the barrel in
Yeah.
the American League. So or I mean in Major League Baseball. So that's interesting to think about as well. We this started with Ken Griffey Jr. and being a fourth highest paid. The other interesting thing, so they've got Votto who's making like 25 million, Will Myers making 6, and then Mike Moustakas is the next, and I think he's making like 11 or something like that this year. I don't think he's playing for the Reds this year. I could be wrong about that. And so you've got a bunch of this money that's being paid out that guys aren't even playing for your team anymore. And Griffey being he deferred almost. I was reading a little bit about this. He deferred about half his salary when he signed back in 2000. So his will actually end in 2024. The most famous one that gets talked about every year is Bobby Bonilla, Bobby Bonilla Day in July 1st. So his will go through 2035, making a little over $1 million a year. But it was, as I was reading this, kind of the original with this was relief pitcher Bruce Sutter with the Braves in 1984. He signed this deferred contract, and then the Braves agreed to defer it at 12.3% interest.
Yeah.
So they started paying him, and he just had his last payment in 2022. So that ended up being a lot of money. 12.3% interest is how can you not feel good about that deal?
Yeah, and for those doing the calculations at home, the original contract that Suter signed was 6 years, 9.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up getting paid approximately 47 million on that contract. So well done, Braves.
Yeah. Well, and this is interesting because you were talking about how it affects your favorite team's payroll, and it does. But in the case of like Bobby Bonilla, by them being able to defer money, I was reading a little bit about Bobby Bo's contract, and they were able to go out and get like Mike Hampton, which somehow turned into a draft pick compensation for David Wright. And so so it's a weird saying, the fourth highest paid player for the Reds is Ken Griffey Jr., who's been retired for 10 years, and it feels kind of absurd. But at the same time, it does alleviate in the short term some of the contract needs, which does allow you to sign another player. So it goes both ways. I mean, when you're paying Chris Davis $14 million, that hampers payroll. But if you're paying Bobby Bo $1 million, and you were able to defer that, that does provide you some leverage to get some other players as well.
Yeah, and these contracts get pretty creative. This, as far as like deferred contracts and different terms, this is a pretty straightforward one compared to some of the things that are out there, like guys who are promised certain types of jobs and whatever with the team at the end of contracts. So this is a pretty, pretty common thing that's used now. The Mets were kind of the first to use it pretty regularly. They had Bobby Bonilla, obviously, who was on the later end of their deals. Darryl Strawberry was the first in 1985, did a 20-year deferred contract. Brett Saberhagen also a 24-year deferred contract before Bonilla at 33 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we're hopeful that you've enjoyed going down this rabbit hole with us. We've had a good time with it. It was pretty fun to look up. So look up some more stats. There's actually some pretty interesting articles out there you can find on this stuff. So comment if you've got a favorite deferred comp salary, one that makes you laugh every time you read it. Subscribe, join us tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. Join us. Till then, we'll see you.